All right, guys, welcome back. I've got a follow-up video to my putting with Stever video. In that video, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's, I think, pretty, at least at the minimum, interesting. Um, but I have a pretty direct putting method, to say the least. And as I was kind of going through it and showing y'all what I do, I got back to 160-ish or something like that, and said, anything 160 or further, it's pretty much it's a full throw for me. And um there's no partial throw for me, and I'm trying to throw in from any kind of this range. So I just want to kind of highlight what I do, some of my disc choices, because I do have a weird bag, why I made the choices that I made, and then just kind of how I go through my method and putting a run on it. So um for me, it's all about reducing the variables. I don't have an interest in trying to pick an aim point to throw to. To me, that just seems difficult. I see a lot of videos, people will be like, well, I'm in my spot on this hole, and I know that from this yardage on this hole, I can throw this disc. And I have a hard enough time remembering my lines on each hole. So for me, I want to be able to throw in with a consistent aim point and slight adjustments from that consistent aim point. Just let the disc do the work for me. So my way of doing that is this top chevron here. The point of it gets put on the band, right? And essentially, I've made all my disc choices based on this aim point. And each disc has a certain yardage or footage, I guess, where this thing is going to be coming by chain height when I aim at this height and I throw for that yardage, right? This particular one, 199, it's core for me, this roll core. And my aim point for the band and how the stability of the core works is just on the right side of the band here. All right, so if I aim right side band, wait for it not to sway crazy, too high, too left, right about there looks good. Okay. Decent run at it, but probably missed my sway. It's hard for me to talk and concentrate at the same time. Great way to check this, by the way. Just bringing it back up. Honestly, that's right where I wanted to release it. I think a combination of this wind and probably a little bit of a left wobble. Got that one left of the basket. I think that's a little better run there. So, even if you do everything right, there is still, randomness built into the game. You're not going to hit this thing every time, but you can give yourself a pretty darn good chance of making it. So that's kind of the basic idea right there of how I release it. Now let's look at how I built my bag, because like I said, it is weird. But for me and that aim point, top chevron on the band, here's my bag. And the hope, I already went through the hope. The hope is partial only. I do not throw it full power and expect to make it. It just, when you do that at this height, the height that I like, it turns right at the target. I know I pulled that on a little Annie, but it goes over there and it doesn't fight back. So for me and my disc selection, aiming right here, it needs to have a certain amount of stability. And for me, the minimum stability is this Challenger. I put it on that same low line and it gets left. All right, that one never actually got right of the basket, which is great. I don't know how that happened. Probably my fault. All right, so it'll look something like that. It goes straight when I throw full power. It doesn't turn and then can't fight out of it. So with a putter, that's kind of my shot there. And this one I can throw, if I adjust it up to where the aim point's about right here, which is all the higher I will throw it, 180 is my max on this one. This would be about, I'd say 175-ish. I can aim lower about this point right here. The way that this disc flies, it actually never gets above chain height. So that aim point right there, I can make it anywhere from about 130 to 155, 160 with a full power throw. So that's my yardage on this one. Core, I've already gone over this one. Aiming at this point, that's 199. I would probably only aim about that much lower, maybe for like a 180. And I would say I would be able to throw this thing, I don't know, probably up to like 225, 230, aiming a little higher. I don't like aiming too much higher than that, because when you, like, I could probably get the Challenger there, but when I throw at the height to do so, see how much drop it has as it's coming down? This goes back to that first video, and that graphic that I had where, if you putt with less power, you have to aim higher, and the thing is falling as it comes to the basket. So if this is my basket and I'm here and I'm putting high, the disc is falling and it's only chain height from here to here. But if I aim a little lower and just essentially blast it in, for lack of a better word, it stays chain height much longer. So it's coming faster, so it's falling, but not till here, right? So it's coming in as chain height, right? So let's pretend this is that long shot now. If my disc never really gets higher than this, then as it's coming down, it's chain height for much longer. So same concept applied to the throw-ins. I want to throw this sucker low, right? So back to how I built my bag. Any disc that you see with an accurate on here is a throw-in disc for me. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9 throw-in discs. 8 of which are full power only, essentially. I do partial the Challenger for like 150, but it's a pretty small window where I'm going to be partialing that disc. I already went through the ranges on these. This core, the glides, that's 215. I go from there to the stag. That's 250. Sampo and PD both go the same distance. That would be about 275, 280. And then this glide PD, about 310, 305 to 310 for this aim point. So I want to take a closer look at kind of the stats of these discs. I talked a little bit about the minimum stability needed. Stability is such a, again, random. I've talked so much about that. It doesn't really affect, stability is the wrong word, but we'll just say the fade to turn ratio is just, it's a good number to look at. These are all taken times 100, but essentially when you divide the fade by the turn, 42, that's not stable enough, right? 46 was the Challenger, that was my minimum stability. But these ratios are all relative to how fast the disc is. So this disc is actually about as stable as these, just because it's so slow. You throw it faster. If you threw this disc faster than that, like if it was a faster disc, it would turn more and not be able to fight out of it. So the core, stag, sampo, PD, they all have the exact same fade to turn ratio. So this is that other variable, other variables that I'm talking about. I want to reduce as many variables as possible. I got my aim points the same. Which disc I pick determine how far away I am, how I'm trying to make it. And they all are going to come back to center. So my aim point right to left on the band is pretty similar, right? The core is kind of the exception. And there's not a ton of discs like this that are decent options. I think like the Gateway might be, the Gatekeeper. Westside Gatekeeper is probably about the one that would slot best into it. It's a little bit more understable than I want. But when you start throwing like warships and stuff like that, it's just, there's too much turn and fade to really be consistent. So the core is great. It's just slightly more stable than these other ones when you factor in the speed. So that's why it requires that aim point to kind of be over here on the right side of the band to get to come back. The rest of these discs, are pretty much center aim points. So I'm aiming dead center of the band, right in the middle, every one of these discs, right? And then making adjustments for the other factors off of that. So how do I make those adjustments? Let's go ahead and go into Paint here. We'll do some of my fancy graphicking. All right, so this was my 200 foot disc, right? So this line right here would be 200 feet, right? If I'm aiming slightly lower, right, that's way lower, but right. So I aim down here. That's probably about 190, 185, 190. This thing doesn't have as much lift, so honestly, that's probably about 180. As I loft it a little higher in the air, that would be like 210, 220, right? So I can throw this to fill the gaps. I just have to aim a little higher, okay? And this is where the fade and turn numbers are very important. So I'm aiming dead center here. When I aim lower, the disc is going to turn more, so I need to adjust my aim to the left. When I aim higher, it's going to fade more. I guess it'll turn less, causing it to fade out sooner. I'll need to adjust my aim to the right. These adjustments are pretty linear, right? So with a core, you can make these adjustments kind of like this, right? So if I were not as prepared for this video as I like to try to be now, so you're gonna get a little bit of my rambling going on here. All right, so if this is my aim point, right, and I'm aiming here for my 200, when I aim up on this next line for 210, I'm gonna need to drag it over a little bit to let it fade more. Going up here for 220, I gotta drag it over a little bit more because it's gonna fade more, right? Down here, it'll turn less, right? I don't want this thing to go away when I start erasing stuff. Okay, so that's how I make my adjustments for yardage. So what happens when you're playing a disc that has more turn and more fade? The angle of this line, it changes. So let's get on the right layer. Yeesh. Yeah, we'll just do a different color. Make it the easiest. All right, so this is my core line. Let's say I was using a warship, right? And you work out that your warship, when you aim here, your Echo Glide warship will hit from like 230, probably from there. It's got more lift. It's not quite as fast as a core, but the extra lift makes it go further. So the line for that one, right? This is my aim point here. When you aim lower, it actually plays slightly less stable because it has so much more turn, it kicks it out, right? And then as you go further out, you're going to have to aim further right. So aim point for the warship here, if this is 230, I'm going to use it here to throw the 240. I'm going to have to go more to the right than I would the core when I adjust. Up here, I got to go more to the right when I adjust, okay? For me in my bag, this is like kind of the PD, right? The PD I put in there. At one point, I had like all Sampos in there. And the problem I had with that, as much as I love it, it's not very versatile, right? There are holes where you want a disc to shape a fairway. There are holes where you need to put a little hyzer on it so it gets way left. there are holes like 8 on Northern Breeze, right? You want to aim down, you want it to turn right of those trees and then hook up and get back. So Sapphire is by far the most popular disc for that. For me, that disc is it's like the musket and Sapphire. If I were to aim here where I like to aim, I'm gonna have to adjust that aim way left to account for all the turn. I don't like that. Um, it should be the same, but it's not. So you guys can apply this with that disc. Either you just need to make your standard aim point up higher. You can be like, I'm going to aim where the bottom of this whole basket icon is, and I'll make my adjustments from there. Just know that your disc is going to be coming in with more drop when it gets there. So your windows for making are going to be smaller, in my opinion. So that's why I personally don't like that. I like keeping that low line drive trajectory, and I will make my adjustments from there. So I live up here. I live up here in this range, most commonly with the core and the stag. I do that because I want to throw a softer bid because there's trouble behind it and I want it to stop quicker. Or the core to stag for me is like a 35-foot difference. So I need to be able to come up here with a core. I need to be able to try to throw in with a core from like 240, even though this is 215. I can come up here and try to hit from 240. And then at 240, I could also take a stag and aim down here. So I use this in my mind. I kind of visualize this, right? So if I've got no wind, flat throw in, and I'm 225, right? Take my core of this 215, adjust it up here, and then move it over a little bit to let it fade. Right? I'm throwing that at the basket, make my adjustments for the wind on top of that. So that's kind of the basics of it. Try to get to the course here. I feel like this video could be freaking 2 hours long if you just waited on me to get to the right spots and throw in. So we'll just cut to some footage. I'll try to put together a little montage and then we'll just comment on what I'm doing. And we'll just take a look at that. So I'll see you out on the course. Here we are. I made a little montage of some throw-ins just to kind of highlight how this would work out on the course itself. This first one was the only one from my phone. It's kind of a pain in the butt to transfer them over, so I shot the rest of them just right before I am recording this. But this one is Coyote Canyon 2, 242, so I'm throwing stag at it. It's a short clip, so I'm kind of setting it up before we see this one. But 250 is what a stag does, so you'll see as I go, I don't really go through the whole aiming process where I can talk you through it, but 250 would be center of the band, this top chevron, center of the band. So I have lowered it so that it'll come through chain height at 242. But in doing so, I'm going to add some turn. So I've adjusted the aim to the left, which would have been right about here. I do have that one headwind, which is going to minimally affect it, but I'm talking about scooting it over about from here to here. And then when I'm on the phone, most of the time, instead of playing this way, and if I really want to make one, I'll sit there and pay attention to this way. But when I'm on my phone, I typically just snap it, which is what I do here. Just let it rip. So that's coming in chain height, hits it. And that's the whole point of this, is that we want to make it to where we can just, we don't have to have certain yardages and discs and elevation memorized. We just can make these adjustments on the fly, just because we have a system that works in any situation. All right. So this is literally the first shot I threw when I sat down, and I'm like, all right, let's try to find some holes where I can go through this method. But this is Oak Hill 2. I figured to start off with, I would kind of show the importance of having a roll disc. So I picked this because there's a hill behind it. So I go PD, which is like a 280. So you'll see me, there's winds, doesn't do much. I kind of adjust it up. You'll notice I in post, I added a chevron there that's just going to stay there the rest of this video, just so you can see where I release it. And if we, first toss of the night, my goal there, by the way, was to show how the roll disc will sit down and not leave you too bad of a comebacker. But let's pay attention to the sway here. So I've got it, a little bit above the band, dead center. And you can see when I release this, it's a little bit, it's like on the band and a little left. So that little bit low left added a little bit extra turn. But the fact that it swayed down and left allowed it to stay on basket, and I got lucky. But when you're intentional with your sway, you miss it by just a little bit, you still have a good chance of making it. So I'm like, well, let's take another crack at it. Maybe we can see this roll disc thing go happen. So same thing, I go down. That's my normal aim point, a little bit of the basket. There's a tailwind, which is going to push the disc there faster, so I adjust down to allow it to not sail over the basket. And then I kind of tried to judge the wind here. The tailwind is going to take the turn off, we know. So I have to factor in, we talked about vectors in the wind video. So, I figure there's about a 1.5 tail and about a 1.5 pushing to the right. I've aimed down, which is going to add turn, which is going to make it go more right. But that tailwind is going to reduce turn. And so I have kind of just figured that there's going to be a little bit more rightward influence than left, but it's not going to be like a whole bunch of right. So I get down to where I think it's going to be chain height, and then I move it over to the left, just kind of factoring all of that stuff in. And now my goal is just to hit that same spot, which is kind of left center chain, about chain height. You see it swaying all over the place. Just went right there. Boom. That was like a perfect release. That's exactly where I started. And that is just dead center. So started the night out 2 for 2, which I thought was kind of funny. So I was probably laughing right there. That's why I didn't go. So we'll try a third time here to show the importance of a roll disc. Back to that aim spot, slightly above the basket. I only have to account really for this wind here. And you see it sway in. It's kind of left of where I started here. Right about now, I'm probably getting impatient. It was slightly left of where I started. But you'll see this one comes in a little left, but that roll disc will keep it from going down the hill. You can be aggressive with these, lower lines and still only be left with about 80. Granted, the wind's a little crazy and it's uphill a little bit, but again, that sway goes down. I'm just waiting for it to come up. I get a little impatient. And as soon as it rocks up high enough to where I think it'll go in, I just let it rip. So that's just there to kind of show you, what that looks like. Be aggressive with the roll disc. Here I got a backstop, don't need a roll disc because I don't have a roll disc that would go this far. I mean, on the line that I want to be aggressive and give it the best chance going in. But 309, that's pretty much exactly what the PD is, glide PD. So I put it right where I would start normally and then just adjusted the aim there. So I put it down. And like the more you guys practice this, the quicker you'll get. Like I adjusted my aim that quick. That's where I want to hit it. So I adjusted it down because of the tailwind. I don't want it to push it, excuse me, over the basket. Doing so is going to add turn. I also have this essentially 2 left or right wind. So that's a pretty big push to the right. So I have to drag it more over to the left. And then I have that tailwind. So I don't have to put it any more left. Picked my aim spot. Let her rip in the chains. So I'm pretty sure I hit that one on the first throw too. This was they weren't all like this, by the way, but I actually hit with pretty high percentage on these. It only took me half an hour to put this together, half an hour to edit it and stuff, just to kind of cut out the riffraff. But we go back to Lakeside 5, kind of playing it the old-fashioned way before water skip was a thing. So 215 course. All right, 215 is my core, right? So I started with the core slightly more overstable because of the speed. So with the core is the one disc that I will aim on the right side of the band. But you'll notice 215, I only need to add about 4. And 215 really puts it in the center of the chain, so I really didn't need to take it up that much, but just go up a little bit and then make sure I'm going to the right to allow it to fade back more. The higher you aim, the more the fade is, or the turn is reduced, which will have it fading out quicker. So that's my aim spot, kind of right there where the trunk meets the tree. Pretty good release. High chains. So you can see, for me, this is where I was talking. I built my bag around that 0.5 fade to turn. For that reason, man, I've thrown 2-3 different discs now, but my aiming is consistent through the bag. I feel like, at pretty much any range, probably 330, from 0 to 330, I feel like I'm going to put a run on it and feel, the 330, with the PD, it's not a roll. So if I don't backstop, I'm not going to run that. But that PD that I have with the roll, I would say max distance for that one, probably about 315-ish if I, add a little loft to it. So even without a good backstop, I feel pretty comfortable sending that one. So here, KO Park 4, we got 223. We got a little elevation here too, so we're going to be factoring that in as we start to pay attention to elevation now as well. But I'm going to start my 215, and then you can see me adjust it up for the elevation. Now, what I do for elevation, I'm eyeballing it most of the time. You can tell where your chevrons start. The basket will be kind of up or down. I don't have an exact system for that, but I just kind of feel like I'm aiming, if I started at the chevron, if I was on a level ground, that would be good, but it's up this much. So I just kind of drag the aim up that much, kind of eyeballing it. So I get that here, and then I go ahead and adjust for the wind. Got it. You know what? I skipped a step there. That's why I'm trying to figure out, why did I drag it up higher? And that was 215. I adjusted up to 223. That's my starting point. Now I move it up for the elevation. Okay, then I drop it down and to the right because of the tailwind, and it's going to be pushing it left. Send it. Center chains. So Lakeside 9. I picked this hole just to kind of illustrate how you can be at a yardage that would be best suited for, say, like a PD, but because there's trouble back behind the hole, you can play a shorter disc to be safer. So I kind of do that by first picking the PD, which is my 310, right? So I would aim it lower. I'd take it here, aim it down here because it would put it chain height, but it's also going to add turn. So I adjust the aim out here to the left. So if I was going to throw a PD at it, I'd throw it here. That would be super aggressive because this thing goes 310, or this is throwing for 310. This disc goes, close to 400 feet. So that thing would go launching off the back of this island if it missed, which, I'd love to say I have the confidence I'm going to hit metal every time, but of course that's not possible just through sheer random numbers. So that's where the aim point for that would be. Obviously that's not a smart shot. The PD is a shot. That's the disc I would probably throw at this if there were no trouble behind it. So 280, I'd drag it up about here for 295. I'd adjust it down right there for wind with tail. But this one will be coming in pretty hot still. Even with the roll, I don't feel comfortable that that's going to hold the island. So if I go stag, that's 250 here, right? So drag it up here, that's about 260. There's about 270. There's about 280. There's about 295. And then you see me moved it over to the left. I actually adjusted it up to 300, so I backed it back down a little bit to 295. Adjusting it left because of the tailwind. And I feel like that's my aim point. Hit it. I'm going to try to show you how the roll will hold it. Instead, I just hit the albatross. So ridiculous. And again, you saw me navigate, and I went through all that stuff just because it was the whole point of me trying to explain that the higher lofted shot would hold. So yeah, ridiculous. So I kind of go through the whole process again. I threw another one on the island here. And this one I kind of line up using the same method. I'm closer, so I'm not aiming as high. You'll notice I worked it up there just for the wind, trying to hit here. And right about now as I'm holding, I'm like, I really don't want to make this again. So I went ahead and just let it drift to the left and threw it anyways. And I honestly think I would have made that if I released it on the spot. It's ridiculous. So you'll see, even missing short side, that disc still had enough loft on it that it set soft, even still in putting range. So that has a little versatility. So here I picked this is Lost Island 6. This is going to kind of be another more extreme illustration of how the elevation works. I'm 235 on flat ground. Max range for a glide core would be, excuse me, I'm battling this cough since I did that remodel project. 240 is flat ground, max distance for a glide core. So up this hill, no shot it's going to get there. I got to go stag. So that's 250 right there. I'm dragging it down to where 235 would be. And then I go up to adjust for the elevation. Again, eyeballing it, but I added, I don't know, from there to there is probably 10, 20, 30, 35 feet or so. I'm adding to that point. And then adjusting it to the left for the wind. Good release, good result. Okay, going to, I think this is the last hole I did, just to show some more elevation changes. But this is Crow's Nest 9, and I just kind of dribbled one off the tee. I'm going to start with the drop zone here. Pull this up. So pulling that down, I'm just guessing that that's going to be right about the right distance I need to throw. If I were to aim, oh, don't you be like that. All right, if I was going to aim, take off, what is that, like almost 40 feet, we'd be looking somewhere down here. But then I think I'm adding 40 feet back because of this, I'd be here, but for that incline, I'd be adjusting it right back up where I started. So I just kind of skipped that part of the process. But I'm trying to throw it on the band, which I did. And heavy left chain, so I decided that was a good enough example. I don't need to make them all. Throwing down here. Oop, just lost my lighting. Hang on. I think we were right about here. So 175. You can use the old eyeball trick here. I just know from throwing the shot a lot that it's about 25, 30 feet you need to add. So that would be 200 right there. 25. I give it a little bit extra just to make sure it gets high enough. Toss that. Hit it. Okay, so I chose this hole not only because of the elevation change, but just to show kind of the versatility and the different discs you can use. So here I'm 195. It's going to be a glide. We need to throw it about 220. Can't really see what I'm doing here, which isn't great, but kind of guessing. Now I'm doing my adjusting. Look like a decent pull. Aimed a little high. I was literally guessing where the band was, so just guessed wrong. Get one way down here. 170 is 205. If 205 I just happen to know is the max for my challenger, so I don't even adjust it. I just send it. It drops in. That's another one. This one gets all the way down there, so it's going to be close. All right, so adding 25 to that, about 186. That's 180 at the top of the band, top of the middle chevron. I aim up a little bit, give it about 5 feet. Release that one a little low, but it sneaks over. Okay, so that's the end of that. So watching that, I'm just now realizing that I kind of forgot something. Okay, so I found myself in certain situations I'll want to throw a forehand, and I haven't tried this with all my discs. I just know it works pretty good with a core and stag for me. You can test this stuff out, with your discs if you want to, start trying to get better at sending these. But if I want to throw a forehand, right, this is normally here for a core. I just go up one chevron. So when you throw a forehand, it reduces the power. Power gets reduced by 5%. The spin gets reduced by 5%. Lift gets reduced. I mean, all the lift goes down because the power gets reduced. So not only is it going shorter, it's not lifting as much. It's not spinning as much, so it'll fade faster. And, all that is a pretty complex system, but it all amounts to about one chevron, is what I've found. But because it fades more too, I'm going to have to, kind of feel it out. I can throw it out here a little more, or I can just try to, put a little ante on it. But okay, you can see that was chain height. That would have went in. So this is useful for holes where backhand might get you in trouble. Is Herringwood's 8. This is where I will use it the most. So most people are trying to throw it to that rock. If you get to that rock or even past that rock, it puts you on the other side of that tree that's down there. And the tree would block a forehand. So you'd pretty much be stuck throwing the backhand if you miss the basket throwing that backhand. See, I'm going to go short of the rock here. If I push it up to the rock, I now have this tree in the way. But if you get up past here and you have to throw a backhand, it's going to be fading in this direction. And you're going to be in a situation where if you miss chains, metal of any sort, you're just careening into that pond back there. So I like to do this. Go forehand, do core. It's 199, adjust it up. This is a little downhill, so I kind of might take about 5 off. That might be about right. Give it a little room out here. Let it sway back up into the right general area. Okay, chain height, I missed it, and there's all this safe area over here. Okay, so it's a little when you're used to not having to play for the extra fade, it's a little weird. I typically just throw it out there and put a little ante on it, and that typically works for me. But that's my eagle play for a safe run on this hole. So you'll kind of find that that might come in handy in certain situations. So yeah, the one thing I just wanted to show you real quick is that you can apply this to your discs as well. PD aim point was right here. Sapphire is going to have to be aimed a little lower, but just find yourself a starting point just like that, to where you can get something coming by chain height, which that was chain height, and you can see it's probably about a basket less stable, at least on how that one was released. So putting it over there with the sapphire, that wobbled down. So you see that one wasn't chain height because the aim was too low. I'm getting impatient at this point. By the way, that's a good way you can check it right there, right? So if I put it dead center band, let me try to release on just an awful wobble. If you ever want to work on it, see how good you are at judging, releasing where where the sway comes back to where you start. Do that and hit the rethrow button. And then when you bring up your arrow again, it's going to show you where you actually released it. So I aimed here, but it wobbled, swayed down to here. So yeah, I think right about a little lower, right about there is where we're going to want Sapphire to get released to run this one. I just find that it's just not quite stable enough to get the results that I want, because that one was released right where I wanted. So now I have to aim out here somewhere to get it chain height and on the basket. It's more sensitive this way. It's more sensitive. Right, so I got that to go. So now you have a starting point for this disc, and you can make your adjustments off of that. But I do find that because there's the randomness of the wobble, which would be the disc shaking when you release, and you get that one that comes out on a little bit more Annie. The thing has no chance of fighting out. And you get the one that's a little bit more hyzery. It'll turn and fade out because it does have quite a bit of fade. So you get it on hyzer and it'll just fade out so fast it dumps out. So I feel like it just has a thinner margin for hitting the basket. So just what I found in my travels. But yeah, that's kind of the end there. So give it a shot. Talk about it on the Discord. Talk about it in the comments. I like conversations. So, do any of you guys have a system that's, I guess, this elaborate? I don't know how elaborate, if elaborate's the right word, but do you guys have, even if it's just for one disc, do you have something like this where you know that you have a set point you aim? And I'm just going to cut the video. I'm not that dumb light. Do you have a set point that you aim and do the adjustments like this with certain discs, and then just have a different set point for another disc? Or do you just have an amazing memory, which I don't, and you can just memorize that when I'm on this spot on this hole, I throw this disc, and when I'm on this spot on this hole, I throw this disc. So ultimately, that's what I was trying to avoid when I set it up like this. So yeah, I'm just interested. Let's start a conversation. So definitely hit me up on that Discord. Let me know what y'all think. All right, I'll catch you next time.